It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming on YouTube at the Team 980. We are talking about football while we watch soccer. That is the kind of time of year it is. The Olympic Games underway. U.S. women's national team is up 3-0 on Zambia, which is fun. And so was day 2 of Commanders training camp. It was a blast to be out there again. And we had a tremendous time talking to gigantic sports radio fan, Nick Allegretti. So we will share with you our chat with Nick coming up in just a little bit. That's going to be at 5:30. But we start by opening up the old notebook and letting you know what we saw today at camp. Today at camp, I actually saw one of the more interesting drills, one of the most interesting kind of approaches that I've ever seen. And talking to Logan about it, he said that this is something that he'd been a part of with DQ before in Atlanta, but it's something that I had never seen in my nearly 10 years doing this. I've been covering since 2015. I didn't go to camp in 2015, but I've been to basically every training camp since. And that is, at some point today, kind of after the individual periods, after the warm-ups, after all that, the Commanders went through what I would call a mini football skills camp. And I will describe it first, then tell you why I think it's important. What was happening is there was basically 3 stations. We've all done circuit workouts. There's 3 stations. The first one was like a scoop and score kind of station. Just work on, hey, ball's on the ground. We got to pick it up. That's important. Ball is life. Make sure we can pick up the ball. It's an oblong thing that bounces funny. Let's practice picking it up and reading it and all that. Number 2 was a catching drill. So everybody, and by the way, the reason this is important is this is not just like defensive players. It's not by position group. It's literally everyone on the team that wasn't an offensive lineman, a quarterback, or a specialist. So anyone that could possibly touch the ball outside of quarterbacks is going through this stuff. And it's basically a receiver drill, modified receiver drill, where you're going up, you're running around some cones, you come back, boom, catch the ball. So let's work on catching the football. And then the last one was a 3-man drill. Player 1 would catch, the easiest way to describe it is he'd catch a slant. Just catch the ball on an angle. Player 2 is coming downhill to try to contain and catch that guy and tackle, except for not actually tackling because they're not in pads yet and they don't really tackle each other in the fall. And then number 3, the third player was coming from behind on the same angle but from the opposite side as the guy who caught the ball, and he's trying to punch it out. So you have a ball catcher carrier, a tackler, and a punch-out guy. And the reason I think this was awesome is not just because we're seeing Cleveland Ferrell, run pass patterns and catch footballs and all this stuff. And you get to see Terry McLaurin, kind of put back his Ohio State special teams hat on. But it's because you have to do all this stuff in games, in certain situations and important situations. You want to create turnovers, you better have defensive players who can catch the football. You want to mitigate a turnover? How about having an offensive guy that chases down a defensive guy who's intercepted the ball and recreates a second fumble? And we were talking about this on Take Command, which we recorded a little bit earlier, and Logan said specifically the way that drill is designed is to not only teach the approach angles and how to punch, but because there's some coaches in the middle whacking the ball carrier with pads, often when you split tacklers as a ball carrier, in the immediate aftermath, you tend to get a little loose with the football, and that's exactly when the other guy would come in and punch it. So it's teaching, hey, if you have the ball and you split, you better protect it. And if you are someone looking to make a play and punch a ball out, that's a prime opportunity to do it. The scoop and score is fairly obvious. Obviously, catching the ball, skill. But if you're going to, as a coaching staff, preach the fundamentals, it was really cool to see a different way that this team coached up and preached and practiced the fundamentals. And so that was something that was different today. I've just never seen, and it wasn't like the receivers did it, then the DBs did. Like, I don't even know how they split up the group. It's almost like they just were like, you guys over here, you guys over here, you guys over here. And they just kind of eyeballed it. Maybe they had groups before, but you're starting to learn more about how they're putting this team together as a team. And I really like it. I was talking, obviously, to Nick Allegretti today. You'll hear some of this later. But Nick said, I've never been in a scrambled locker room before. Terry talked about that yesterday, how he's sitting next to different guys. It's going to be funny. All the beat reporters are going to hate it when they get into the season and everybody's doing interviews in the locker room. It's like, wait, where's that guy again? You can't just go to the DB section, to the wide receiver section. But Allegretti told us, like, he's never talked to a defensive lineman as much in the first 2 months of a season as he has John Allen, with his locker being a couple lockers down, because normally they're across the room. And that creates a great competition on the field, and they talk smack and compete, but it also is a reminder, like, oh, yeah, I know that guy. He's not foreign. He's not another team. That's my teammate. And that buy-in of everybody, and in certain times beyond just like special teamers doing everything together, I thought was great. Some other notes from the day. The officials have been out there every day, which I think is another, like, hey, remember how they're wanting to be detail-oriented? Let's have the officials out there every day. That's a big one for me. In terms of the quarterback stuff today, Marcus Mariota took the individual reps first and the first snaps of 11 on 11. But then once you got into the red zone work situationally, Jaden Daniels took the first snaps, and for most of that, he was with the ones. And then there was the final move the ball period of the day that I'll talk about more in the next segment, that Daniels went first, but it was with the twos. The 2-0 line was out there. He did have Zach Ertz on that drive, which was nice, in part because Zach cut a couple balls and like a couple of really, really nice plays where you're loving to see that chemistry starting to come together. And then the other big thing that I noticed today is the number one defense. You know, how often did we see bust and miscommunications and all that stuff last year? And obviously on the show yesterday, we talked to Benjamin St. Juste, and he gave us some insight on how that is being worked on already and how it's being emphasized and cleaned up and clarified. But the communication amongst that first-team defense, when they're out there, it is so loud on that field. Dudes are just chirping. Shin is loud. Wagner is loud. Luvu is loud. Quan is loud. Like, you have dudes talking nonstop. Not like talking smack, communicating. I've got this. You've got that. We are in this. And if you want to not bust coverage and not give up explosive plays cheaply, where our offenses don't even have to earn it, that's a really good start. And so to see and hear that, I think is fantastic. And it's exactly what Dan Quinn wants. He said it in the press conference yesterday. He said, you'll hear us before you see us if things are going well. And you can definitely hear that happening on the first-team defense. All right, those are some of the big news and notes of the day. We will get into the quarterback performance next, and then coming up at 4:30, number 2 on our most important commanders of the 2024 season countdown. It'll be our most important defensive player. If you haven't been following along, we'll catch you up to on the previous 8 on the list. The 9th and penultimate player coming up at 4:30 here on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Day 2 of training camp in the books. We were out there. Day 3 tomorrow will not be in attendance in Ashburn, but we'll make sure that we have someone who was in attendance to join us, whether that's Nikki Javala, Sam Fortier, we'll figure out who we want to have on, but we will make sure we have you covered every day from training camp. And, of course, today at 5 o'clock, Ben Standig is with us. Actually, I shouldn't say of course, because I don't know that we've actually said that on the show yet. Ben Standig's with us at 5 o'clock, everybody. So looking forward to having Ben with us. Mitch Tischler was awesome with us yesterday. Don't forget, all of our training camp coverage is available to you on demand via the Hoffman Show podcast, so make sure that you check it out if you miss any part of the show. The quarterbacks today were more of the same. Jaden Daniels showed why he's special, showed the what's the word I'm looking for? Almost precocious nature that he has at this point in his career, that he is someone who is already reading defenses at a high level, is already doing the kinds of things that you want to see a starting quarterback do in this league at this point in camp, where Marcus Mariota is holding the ball. He is not really rhythmic. It's not like he can't play. And I know at times I feel like it's being framed like that. He made a couple plays today with his legs. He hit Terry on a beautiful ball down the sideline. He really just was almost force-feeding Terry during the move the ball drill. But move the ball situation today was a 45-ish yard, minute 25 on the clock situation. And I think the thing that really stuck out to me about that was just how many plays Jaden Daniels ran when they ran that drill. It had to be a double-digit play drive. His ability to just make the right reads, manage the clock, spike it here, make sure they get out of bounds there. Obviously, DQs on it with the timeouts. They knew what they had and were able to use those wisely. They got off probably 10 plays plus in the move the ball drill from the 45-yard line with a minute 25 to go. And that's how you have to get it done in this league sometimes, is you have to sustain drives in those tight situations because you're not going to get the big, deep, explosive play. He actually missed one. I think it was in that series. He missed Luke McCaffrey deep on one, just overthrew him a little bit. I know Luke was frustrated, so maybe he came out at the wrong angle or something, but it was an incompletion. But they were able to find it, ultimately, a touchdown on the last play of the drive. Duh, because that's how touchdowns work. With less than 20 seconds to go, though, on the clock to Jeremy McNichols, as Jaden was out there with the twos behind the 2-0 line with mostly two wide receivers and weapons, et cetera, et cetera. But he was able to find McNichols in the front pylon, blitz coming from the defense, and able to create a little confusion and leak the back out. And Jaden bought just enough time that it was not one of those where it was a training camp touchdown, real life sack. I think he genuinely created the time and was able to find McNichols open at the front pylon for a touchdown. So I really liked overall, again, what I saw from Jaden Daniels. Not that he's, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, is Patrick Mahomes out there? I don't want to get, that far out over the skis. But I do think it is worth saying, like, he continues to be the better quarterback. The ball just arrives where it's supposed to be quicker. It's not perfect. There's still a long way to go. We haven't seen him with a live pass rush yet. So there's, again, a long, long way to go, but more encouraging signs on day 2 from Jaden Daniels. Anthony, anything that stuck out to you as you were out there with me again today?
So one, you just mentioned the 11-on-11 move the ball drill. Where he finds McNichols on the right side. When I look at that play, I actually saw Jaden Daniels go from his first read to his second read all the way across to McNichols. So, again, I just think getting these reps, getting this experience is allowing him to, get through his reads. And you want to see that in a rookie quarterback. Also, one of the other things that stuck out to me about Jaden's day was I think he slid the line I don't know their calls or anything, but there was a corner blitz, and they ended up being able to pick up the corner blitz, and he ended up missing some running back down the left side of the field. Or it might have been Bird. He might have overthrown. Yeah, it was Bird. He had overthrown, but it was the fact that he was able to slide the line and then try to deliver a pass down the sideline. But these are the things like we want to see Jaden Daniels do, and like he's getting it done right now. And the last thing is just how decisive he's been. I think even though they aren't in pass, the fact that he is being quick and decisive, that can translate to when they actually do put the pads on. So
for sure,
I love what I'm seeing out of him.
Yeah, I think that the control he has over the game is really impressive for you. I mean, it'd be what you want, period. But especially for a young player, it's just really, really impressive to see a young guy be able to get through progressions. And I think the other thing too, and also like again, clock control situations, like being in control of the line, or at least being in communication with Biotish, that they're all on the same page. If Biotish is ultimately the one that's making those calls, but I think that one thing that is super high level for quarterbacks is to make what I'm going to call chunk reads. This is my terminology, not anything official, but it's the best way I can think of to describe it. But basically, like, yes, sometimes you're going to go through a linear progression, 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. If there's 5 eligibles out on a given play. But sometimes you're going to read number 1, and in reading it, you figure out what is happening. And you go, oh, well, I know 2 and 3 are dead. Let me get straight to 4. And I feel like that's, in a sense, what happened on the McNichols touchdown, where it was like, yeah, he got to multiple reads, but he also realized, he's like, wait, this and this are covered. That shouldn't be happening. Like, one of these guys, and sometimes it's like this, right? This and this are covered. That shouldn't be possible. That means someone else is open. Oh, it's over here. And like to be able to process that chunk of information quickly is what makes good quarterbacks great. And again, it's training camp. It's all contextual. It's not saying that Jaden Daniel is great right now. He hasn't seen another team yet. He hasn't seen pads yet. He hasn't done anything in the NFL yet. But that is a skill that I think he has. He has an ability to process information and move through progressions at a high rate. So I'm definitely excited to see where he goes from here. I'm definitely excited to see him continue to grow. I'm definitely excited to see the growth of this offense too, because the other thing too that I think is interesting, is we've been mostly in red zone these first 2 days when you're in team situations, and today you had a little bit more, and some of that is to make sure like guys don't pull hamstrings and stuff, right? If you're only running 20 yards at a time, that's different than opening it up for 40, 50 yards that you might have on some routes, and it limits the amount of high-speed running, which is very, very smart from a sports science standpoint to ease into that, to gradually build the high-speed running over the course of a couple of days here in this acclimation period. But it also means we have a very limited sense of what this offense is. We haven't seen the offense in the middle of the field on first and second down very much. And what does that look like? Do we see a lot more read option? We haven't seen Jaden take off and run yet. Do we see Terry more or less involved? Ertz has been pretty involved. Does that drop once you get out of the red zone? Like, these are the questions that are good reminders to ourselves that we haven't seen. We ain't seen nothing yet. We haven't seen very much at all, and it is going to be a process to get this installed and to see it be crisp. And Jaden's done very well with a very few specific things so far, and those things are very, very important, right? Red zone is where you score points. Being good in the red zone is really good and really important. But the majority of where the game is going to be played is something that offensively and defensively, 7-on-7, 11-on-11, we haven't seen a lot because they've been so focused on red zone early in camp.
Yeah. Another takeaway that I have from camp, defensively, I haven't really seen the 3 safety look. Maybe you have. Have you seen it at all? Because I've seen Quan
I feel like, I feel like they've been in some nickel with Sainer still out there, and I do think that they had some Buffalo stuff today where Quan was down. it's hard because, like, you try to watch one thing. Anyone that claims they can see everything at once is lying. O'Connell, I remember talking to KOC. I've told this story before, so if you heard it, I'm sorry. But I remember talking to O'Connell after one of the first training camp practices in, like, 2019 and being like, dude, there's so much happening. It's hard. And he goes, see a lot, see a little, see a little, see a lot. And I was like, see a lot, see a little. Basically, if you try to watch everything, you're going to see nothing. If you focus on one individual matchup, you'll get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
And so there are times where, like, I'm focusing on Jamin Davis and how he's doing as a pass rusher. I'm watching Forbes and Terry go at it. I'm watching Jaden's footwork. I'm watching the O-line. And then you're like, by the way, who was in on that play? Or like today, that I have no idea what happened on the deep ball that Mariota hit to Terry, other than it got completed. Because I don't know if it was a double move. I don't know if it was if Emmanuel slipped. I don't know what happened because I was watching something else, and then the ball goes up, and you're like, oh, okay, what happened there? And you have to go find out from someone else. I'm guessing you were watching based off your body language there?
I wasn't watching. I was watching this. I was looking at the safeties. Also, I was looking at the left side of the field because the previous play, Forrest had just got the PBU, so I didn't think they were going right back. And then, but that's also what I want to see out of Forbes. Yes, you get beat, but guess what? The next two plays, you defend the out, you defend the curl. So it's just like, all right, way to, continue to play and keep your head in the game. And one last thing that I did see and notice, Jaden Daniels knows how to use the hard count. He got a couple of defensive players to jump several times, and, they got a couple of free plays. So it's just the little things that, he's slowly but surely adding to the game. And it's exciting to watch, to be honest, just because he's so young.
Yeah, no, and that goes more into the command of the game and all the stuff that we're talking about. He does pro quarterbacking stuff, and there's so much value in that. There's so much that you can get. Like, you deploy that kind of stuff, your hard count, whatever, in a key situation, and get a free first down. Like, that stuff matters. I think
they went from like 3rd and 6. He got them to jump to 3rd and 1. You run a inside zone, you get the first down. So it's little things like that.
Yeah. By the way, their run game looked. They didn't do a lot of stuff, but they legit popped a couple today. Eckler had a big run. We'll see how that goes once the pads go on. But getting some of the timing and rhythm of the combination blocks and stuff, encouraging so far. Speaking of blocks, our guy Nick Allegretti, our new favorite commander, because he is a phenomenal talker. We will let you hear our interview with him coming up at 5:30. But next, number 2 on our list of the 10 most important commanders of the 2024 season. We will reveal number 2 next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the team at 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well at the team 980. And if you miss any part of the show, always check out the Hoffman Show podcast. Just search the Hoffman Show wherever it is you get yours. Right now, it is time here at 4:30 on Thursday, July 25th, to unleash number 2 on our list of the 10 most important commanders of the 2024 season. If you have missed it, Anthony, let's see if I can do it again. Number 10 was Dorrance Armstrong. Number 9 was Emmanuel Forbes. Number 8 was Brandon Coleman. Number 7 was John Allen. Number 6 was Quan Martin. Number 5 was Deron Payne. Number 4 was Bobby Wagner. Number 3 yesterday was Terry McLaurin. And that leads us to
number 2.
Number 2. This will be the most important defensive player on the Commanders roster based off our countdown. And if you've been paying attention to kind of the criteria here, I don't think this will be remotely surprising to anyone. Because the reason we had Terry at number 3 is he has to have a good year. There is no one who is a bigger playmaker on that offense outside the quarterback, and I guess you can probably guess who number 1 is going to be tomorrow, but there is no one who's a bigger playmaker. There is no one who, if he is not playing up to that standard, can reproduce his production. And so who is essentially that true about on the defensive side of the football? And the answer is Frankie Luvu. The Commanders, or the newest commander, one of them, signed from the Panthers in the offseason, the Carolina signee, is an off-ball linebacker who can play coverage, has great speed, can cover tight ends, can cover backs, will make plays in the defensive backfield, can carry tight ends up the field. Like, he is a freakish level athlete. He is also a guy who might get 10 sacks this year. And they're going to need him to do both things. They're going to need him to be an effective pass rusher, an effective blitzer. They're going to need him to play in coverage and play well. They're going to need him to, make tackles in the run. Like, he's going to be a 100 tackle guy, as Wagner's hopefully a 150 tackle guy. I don't know if Wagner's going to be a 180 tackle guy like he was last year, but it's certainly possible. I just think that ultimately, if you think of teams that win championships, and I'm not saying the Commanders are going to do that, but the teams that perform at their best, the teams that get the most out of their talent, no matter where that talent is on the sliding scale of terrible, in need of a rebuild, to championship roster, it's the teams whose best players play well. And in that way, it's this simple. I think Frankie Luvu is the best defensive player on this team. And thus, if he plays well, they should give themselves a pretty good shot. Now, I think you can make an argument, obviously, for John and Deron as being better players, but you have redundancy there between the two of them, and you have Johnny Newton behind them. If all of a sudden Frankie Luvu is out, your best bet is that Jordan McGee, the rookie out of Temple, can come in and be a stud. And I will say one thing that's interesting is McGee was playing with the starters in the base defense yesterday as a third linebacker. He has played some on the edge as well, which I think is interesting. So McGee is a guy who I think will come in and probably play solidly well for a rookie. He's got a lot of speed. He is incredibly bright. I think he's got good instincts. Like, there's a lot to like about a guy who was suddenly in the 5th round, and you're going, wait, why isn't this guy going higher again? And part positional value, right? A middle linebacker, especially one that's already 23 years old, is not going to be a super high pick. But could he come in with the Bobby Wagner next to him and Ken Norton Jr. coaching him and Luvu as a mentor and all this stuff and be a pretty good player? Sure. But he's not going to be Frankie Luvu. And you're going to lose a pretty significant amount of production if Luvu isn't in there. I think the thing that's most interesting about Luvu is what is his usage package in 2024? Is this someone who is going to line up a ton on the ball as an edge player at all, as an edge player? Or is he always going to get his pass rush from the linebacker position. You know, maybe he'll mug the A-gap some. Maybe he'll come from outside. But it'll be, you know, like personnel groupings-wise with 4 down or 4 rush players in front of him. Or do you have occasionally him on the field with Bobby Wagner and 5 or 6 defensive backs, and he is one of the down accounted for edge, you know, rush players? And then can he, you know, be a blitzer through the middle of an offensive line? Like there's so many questions about Luvu because he's capable in theory of so many things. And I think he is as close as this team has to the Micah Parsons role that Dan Quinn not necessarily used Micah in last year and 2 years ago, but think about Parsons as a rookie where he was truly splitting time between being an off-ball linebacker and an edge player. That, to me, is the best usage package for Frankie Luvu, where you take advantage of him off the ball, use his speed, coverage, you know, making tackles in the run game, getting behind Allen and Payne and having clean lines to make tackles for loss. And then in certain situations when you want to dial up the heat, he's your number 1 blitzer. Now, they also have other great blitzers in guys like Quan Martin. So how they offset those two and allow them to play off each other, I think is going to be pretty fascinating. But long story short, he's not just number 2 because of the ceiling. He is number 2 because I have a hard time thinking he's not going to be at least somewhat effective because he is that good of a player. And if all of a sudden something were to happen where he's not producing at a high level, whether he's unavailable due to injury or he's just not playing well, I think this defense is in big, big trouble. And in that way, Frankie Luvu has earned the distinction of being the number 2 most important commander in 2024, according to, me. Anthony, thoughts, additions, additional questions on the Frankie Luvu front?
No additional questions. I would add that earlier today, Dan Quinn was talking about, you know, from his first stint as his head coach, what kind of players he was more so like looking for. And now that he's in his second stint,
well, we have the bite.
We actually do.
Yeah, so we can let Dan say. I mean, I love hearing you quote Dan Quinn, but we might as well let Dan Quinn quote Dan Quinn.
One thing that's evolved probably for me is multi-positional players, and there's real value to that, to where, you know, a wideout who can take snaps, a linebacker who can play defensive end, and a safety that can play down to linebacker. So not everyone can do that, but for the people that can, you've added value, and there could be a new look or a new scheme to work. So the multi-positional players, to me, that's been one of the bigger changes, and my time in Dallas allowed me to explore into that area more, and it's led me now to, you know, with our own staff, are we looking for that? Can we find some other roles for people?
Yeah, so off of that, off of what he said earlier today, this goes hand in hand with what you just mentioned about Frankie Luvu and his versatility. I think, you know, when we talk about the best players, yes, Bobby has the experience. Yes, Deron and John have been here for so long, but that versatility that Frankie has in pass coverage, being able to get to the quarterback, tackling, you know, the open field and things of that nature, I just think that just adds value. And I think that goes hand in hand. It's very on brand for what Dan Quinn wants and needs in his defensive players.
One of the things we talked about over the past couple of years with some of the guys like Curtis Samuel, right, over the last couple of years, is Curtis allows you to change personnel without changing personnel. You go from, we have 3 wide receivers to we have 2 running backs in the game, except for there was no substitution. And you don't know as a defense when the Commanders would break the huddle when Curtis was on the field, where he would line up and what role he would need to occupy, and thus how to treat him in your coverage structures. And I think what a guy like Luvu does is he does that to an offense. Like, you break the huddle and you're expecting a base defense look, and all of a sudden they're in a Cinco package because they've added Luvu to the line of scrimmage. Or, you know, a guy like Chin, you're expecting a certain look, and all of a sudden he's in the box and he's basically a linebacker. You thought you were in you know, a lighter personnel. You're really more based off alignment heavy. So, of course, there are downsides and limitations to all these things. They're not optimal at their secondary position, but the skill set to have it can really cause havoc. And man, Quinn and Peters and Jowett Jr., like, they understand that on a major level. And Peters knows how to find players like that, and you've seen it with offensively, like Juszczyk, Kittle, and Debo in San Francisco. But defensively, Quinn has had guys like that, and I'm excited to see what he can do with them and what Joe Witt, who deserves a ton of credit as well, what Joe Witt can do with them as the DC. All right, what are your expectations for Frankie Luvu in 2024? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Your expectations for Frankie Luvu. We're taking your calls next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Our pal Ben Standig will join us coming up at 5 o'clock. Of course, the Commanders beat reporter for The Athletic. Right now, though, we take your calls at 301-230-0980 on your expectations for Frankie Luvu in 2024, the number 2 most important commander for us, according to our list / my list, going into the 2024 season. Let's go to Gary in Upper Marlboro. Gary, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My expectations for Frankie Luvu is he's got to be the best player on our defense. Okay, and I think he has the potential to do that. The only thing that scares me a little bit about him is people are talking about the number of tackles he had with Carolina. Well, that's an inflated number because they were on the field all the time because they had a deplorable offense. But I think he's got the potential to be the best player on the defense. And I think that's what my expectation is. When you go into the offseason with $90 million or whatever it was under the cap, and he was the top player that you picked when you had that much cap space, he's got to be one of your top players on defense, and he is a major upgrade over all of the linebackers that we've had over the several years. So my expectation is he's going to play potentially at a Pro Bowl level, and we need him to play at a Pro Bowl level.
Gary, Gary, thanks for the call. I don't disagree with that. I think that is exactly what you're hoping for from Frankie Luvu in 2024, that you're bringing this guy in. And I think it's a good point in terms of the sheer volume statistically, right? You know, Carolina's offense was so bad that their defense was on the field 1 million snaps last year. And so, you know, is he a guy that with a more efficient offense and is on the field as much is going to get 100 snaps or 100 tackles, especially playing next to Bobby Wagner, who's a tackling machine and is going to eat up some of the stuff that maybe Luvu is right behind him? No, probably not. But, you know, from an impact standpoint, how many plays are you making in the backfield? Are you disruptive in the pass rush? Are you getting your hands on footballs, deflecting stuff? I'm excited to see. And we saw some of that in the spring. I feel like we saw a couple of Frankie Luvu, deflections when he's out there in coverage. So I'm excited to see what we see from Luvu as things get going. And I think the joint practices will be a good feel out period for some of that. What does he do in those sessions? Take some more calls if you want, 301-230-0980. I do think it's worth hearing real quick from Dan Quinn, not on Luvu, but on Jamin Davis, because when they initially signed Luvu, I thought it would be Luvu and Davis, because I think Jamin actually finished the year pretty well last year. And yet it seems very clear that this staff does not think incredibly highly of him. So what has Dan Quinn seen so far from Jamin Davis through 2 days of camp and, of course, what they saw in the spring?
Yeah, Dave, that's one of the positions that I spoke about, to have multi-position work, and we'll continue to do that with him. He's got speed and length, like an outside backer does. So you need work at it, and it's not something that I'll know in 1 or 2 days. So we'll work all the way through to add another pass rusher to a group. That adds depth, that adds value. So you'll see him some in some third downs and some 2 minutes, working off the edge, just to keep pushing. What else can we do? How else can we feature players? And Jamin's a perfect example of that, Dave.
I do think that it's interesting that through 2 days of camp and really throughout the entire minicamp period, we didn't see Jamin Davis as an off-ball linebacker. So he's kind of working exclusively trying to figure out this edge thing right now. And does that hold up, or do they eventually start working him back in at linebacker? I will say, well, he's mostly been working with the threes. Jamin did work with the twos in 2 minute today. So that is worth pointing out that in the 2 minute, one of the situations that Dan Quinn just mentioned there, you do see Davis working in. Davis, Luvu, Jordan McGee, they've all worked at some at that pass rusher spot as guys that are traditionally linebackers. What are your expectations for Luvu this year is our question at 301-230-0980. Let's go to Drew. Drew, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show. Drew. Oh, Drew. All right, Drew. I wonder if Drew accidentally put himself on mute or something.
There he is. Hold on.
All right, let's Anthony's gonna talk to Drew and see if we can figure out what happened to Drew's phone. I would like to know what Drew. Oh, now it looks like Drew's calling. Drew is calling on line 1. Now Drew's calling on line 2. Are we actually gonna get Drew on the phone? These are the questions that keep us up at night. All right, let's try again. Drew, are you there?
Hoffman, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. All right, Drew, what do you got on Frankie Luvu?
All right, Frankie Luvu. I'm from D.C., born and raised, and I love the burgundy and gold. I'm 52 years old, and this is a guy that he was with Carolina, and he's mobile. He can move. He can tackle. You know, I played football too, so game recognized game. And this guy's going to be special. I could see him all over the field. I could see him lining up everywhere. You know, I was an H-back.
Drew, I got to stop you, man. You've told us more about you than you have Frankie Luvu. What are your thoughts on Luvu?
Yeah, Luvu, I'm excited about him. And I told your manager, your guy who answered the phone, I wanted to say something about Trent Williams.
Okay, well, we're talking about Frankie Luvu, so we're going to keep it moving. Let's go to Darren. Darren, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show. Please, for the love of all things holy, tell us about what you think for Frankie Luvu in 2024.
Craig, you are so funny. You talking about for the love of all things holy. Craig, my thing is this. I think he has like 18 or 19 sacks or something on his career.
Man, I got to know. Speaking of all things holy, I got to know. Oh, so for his career, I thought you were about to say, Darren, I thought you were about to say this season. I was like, I got to know who you're praying to because that's who I got to direct my mind to if you think he's going to get 18, 19 sacks this year. Continue. My bad. That's on me.
Yeah, it would have to be some kind of deity, wouldn't it?
It would. He's good, but that's a big year.
Man, that's a big year. Well, let me tell you what I think, though, Craig. If we can get 5 sacks out of him this year from the linebacker play, of course, yeah, I think that would be a major impact. I think he would have done way more than we would have ever expected from one linebacker, any one linebacker on this team right now. I think he would be the one that we would probably get the best play at linebacker and probably see him on more blitz than any other 2 linebackers that we'll have starting, Jamin Davis and Warner. Warner's getting a little up there in his football years. So, but Luvu, he's a great asset. He's strong. He does play like his hair on fire, like everybody say. We can get 5 sacks out of him and maybe 2 fumble recoveries. Oh, yeah. At crucial moments in the game, those fumble recoveries, oh, yeah, he would have done more than enough for me because I'm one of the believers in him.
All right, Darren, appreciate the call. Thank you. For whatever it's worth, 5 sacks, exactly what he had last year in Carolina, or 5.5 last year in Carolina. Had 7 the year before. That is his career high. And I do wonder, under this Dan Quinn, Jowett Jr. defense that's going to, I think, have him as a focal point. We've seen an ability for Dan and Joe to get guys loose. Can you get that back to that 7 number? Can you get even higher than that for Luvu? I think it's going to depend on opportunities, and I think that's something that will play out as the year goes, depending on how other guys are playing, depending on what they think is best for Luvu, depending on certain matchups. Some weeks he'll be more involved in the pass rush. Some weeks he'll be more of a traditional off-ball linebacker playing in coverage and concerned with run fits and the linebacker stuff. So going to be fun to see play out next to Bobby Wagner, of course, for the 2024 season. Luvu, number 2. I think you can probably guess who number 1 is, but we will reveal it, tomorrow at 4:30. When we get back, Ben Standig joins us. My chat with Nick Allegretti at 5:30, 6 o'clock. We preview the wide receivers, one of 2 position groups we have left in our position group previews. That's all still to come on this edition of The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And at 5 o'clock, we bring in an expert on the day's top story. And, well, let's be honest. During Commanders training camp, it's going to be hard-pressed to knock them off the front page, if you will. So it's time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
I know Ben Standig was there because I saw him with my own two eyes. We talked and everything. Standig, what's up to?
Craig, yes, good to see you out there. Anthony as well. You guys are getting the lucky with the weather here coming out, and it's not terrible. I mean,
well, I was a little scared, Ben. I walked out my front door this morning, and it was starting to rain a little bit. And then as I drove out of D.C. into Virginia, everything was dry, clear, lovely. Yeah, it was not bad at all today, which we all know could change on a dime. We could be standing in the mud in 100-degree heat next week, but we'll take it while it lasts.
Yeah, and obviously this is great for the players because, we're all, fetching about hot, humidity. These guys are actually, wearing gear, moving around, exercising, and some of them, look just like Patrick Ewing in the fourth quarter with the sweat just pouring off them. So I won't complain too much.
Yeah, no, not at all. The Ewing call is a great one. Just an unbelievably sweaty human. Working hard, whatever. We're going to move on very, very quickly. Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota continuing to split snaps. What do you feel like you've seen so far from not just Daniels, but from Mariota? And, what have you made of what Quinn has said in terms of how they're handling this? I don't even call it quarterback competition, quarterback situation.
Yeah, look, I don't have an issue with Mariota working with the first team as he's been the last couple of days, and Daniels, kind of getting the next reps. They're mixing and matching, so first teams can be a bit of a misnomer at times. But, Mariota's kind of going first. Look, he may have to play at some point. You hope not, because we're presuming Daniel starts. But it's fine if he's out there. I haven't been terribly impressed with Mariota. I mean, we already kind of know his game. He's mobile. He can move. He can run. But he also is holding the ball a long time in the pocket. And, he did have a nice toss to Terry McLaurin deep down the sideline on one play. But for the most part, kind of just not a lot there. I wouldn't say Daniels lit it up today, but he had the day's best pass, a nice high ball to Mitchell Tinsley in the end zone where only, the receiver could get it. He also was effective ultimately in a 2-minute drive towards the end of practice where he found Jeremy McNichols, the running back, in the end zone. So I don't have an issue if they want to, slow Daniels here in terms of pushing him out with the starter, so to speak, off the bat. It's going to happen eventually, whether it's, next week when the pads come on, whether it's by the time they get to a joint practice, it'll eventually happen. So I don't really have an issue with it, but I just, I'm not going to pretend, like you said, that this is a competition. It's going to be Daniel's job at some point. It's just a matter of when they decide to make that clear.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I also appreciated Quinn, what was it? What's today? Today's Thursday. Tuesday, when he was asked straight away about it on the opening press conference. And he was like, look, it's not a secret. Like, this is what we're doing. And when we're ready to make a decision, like, we'll tell you. We're not trying to hide anything. And I've been generally impressed with the way Quinn's handled things. As you've interacted with him in the spring and now seen him put together for a couple of training camp practices here in the fall, like, what have been your impressions of Quinn and kind of why so many guys are bought in? Because we always hear optimism this time of year, but I don't know. To me, it feels a little bit different. I'm curious what you feel.
Yeah, look, I think that Dan Quinn, if you're looking at his skill set, being personable is very high on the list. And I know some people might be going, well, great, that doesn't help cover Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott. Well, what's that do? But in terms of where this, in terms of connecting to your team, to your players, to your staff, that's huge. You want everybody to be on the same page and believing in what is happening. And for where this team is right now, obviously games will be played and they will keep score and all that, but this is about a complete reset here because everything is so new. And they're trying to I hate the term culture. I got to think of a new one, but they're trying to reset everything on that regard. Again, not just what happens in the locker room, but how they go about their business on the field. And I think that you can, even just in the small interactions we have with the staff, or even sometimes at the press conference, I understand how it is that you hear so much praise around the league for him as a guy, as a connector. And I do think all that's important. And, I would also say, the players, obviously the draft picks have no say in where they go. Sometimes for free agents, they really don't have a ton of say in that. They only, if you have an opportunity, you sometimes have to take it. Coaches, okay, assistant coaches, fine. It might be the same thing, but look at the staff they have. They really have a lot of guys who are, pretty notables, who've been head coaches, who seemingly would have had opportunities elsewhere. And I think the Dan Quinn part of this is why so many of them are here. I would include Adam Peters in there as well, and just, the whole vibe with this place. But I think Dan Quinn, who he is as a personable human, I think goes a long way to what the Commanders are kind of needing right now.
Ben Standig with us here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, you can read his takeaways from camp every day in The Athletic. Defensively, I know it's early, there's no pads, but has anything stood out to you, whether it's who's on the field, where they are, how any particular guy is doing? What stood out to you on that side of the ball so far?
Well, yeah, like you said, it's a lot of too early to like get into, what they're really going to be running and doing. But the thing I like looking at is when you look at the different pieces, like they, like many teams, they're saying, hey, we want our guys, to run and hit, be aggressive, all that stuff, right? Okay. But it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to execute it. And when you look at having Frankie Luvu at linebacker, I just think he's the epitome of what it is that they want to have out there. But it isn't just him. I think Jeremy Chin is another guy like that who's going to be all over the field in that regard. And, even with the drafting of Jordan McGee, who, for whatever it means, he was out there on the very first play of 11s on defense as the third linebacker with Luvu and Wagner, which I think caught some eyes. I think they've added those pieces. Like, again, I know, like you and Logan will certainly break down once you get game tape what they're doing specifically on defense. But really, I think what they're doing right now is implementing the baseline of what they want to do beyond scheme, and that is be aggressive, have guys have the understanding mentality that everybody's got to attack the ball. Joe Witt Jr. talks about the ball as oxygen, things like that. So I think that's kind of what I'm noticing. I think there's questions, of course. We'll see how the cornerbacks hold up. I think the pass rush outside of Luvu on the outside is we'll see. But what they're trying to build, I think when you see them all on the field together, I think you can understand what they want to accomplish ultimately from a mentality standpoint.
Whatever it's worth, Ben. I was flipping through in the commercial break the channels here in the studio on the TV. I don't know why I said that like I'm a 70-year-old man, but I was flipping through the channels, and the Ohio State-Michigan game was on Big Ten Network, and I was like, let's stop down and see if Sanders still does anything, because I don't remember this game. Mike Sanders still just had an interception in Ohio State-Michigan. So you're talking about going to get the ball, and Mike Sanders still's getting interceptions on months-old games on television. So I think the magic is working, Ben. If that's not analysis, then I don't know what is.
Well, look, I mean, that video that the team put out on draft night when they got Sanders still, you have Adam Peters looking at, or talking to Joe Witt off camera, and he says, do you like picks? And I was thinking he was talking about like actual draft picks or something, but he meant interceptions. And, that's when they drafted Sanders still, who, by the way, I don't know if you saw this today. So they did a drill for special teams where they basically just sort of lofted a ball in the air to somebody who would be a would-be returner, and they had an offense and a defensive guy essentially rushing down to, one's trying to tackle, one's trying to block. And Sanders still was one of their returners, and he made a couple times some like legitimate moves that if he did it, if you saw that in a game, you'd be like, oh wow, that is ridiculous. I'm intrigued by the idea of him having the ball in his hands, not just on an interception, but in other capacities. I'm not going to be surprised if we see that ultimately this season.
I do not disagree. I very much did notice that. Logan and I were talking about it, which actually does lead. Somehow I'm watching a game that's like 6 months old, and it led to my next question. So what a world we live in. As I've tried to mentally put together a 53, an exercise that I think we'll go through on the radio for real tomorrow, I realize there's just like 2 to 3 too many guys at every single position, and trying to think of how they think of punt returners and some of these things really impact who ultimately I think makes this team. I don't know if you've done a 53 yet. I know you have at some point this offseason. I don't know what your most recent one is off the top of my head. But as you're watching practice and thinking about some of the decisions that have to be made, like, are we talking about 55 guys for 53 spots, 57, 58, 62? Like, how deep is this roster in terms of guys that have a legitimate shot to make the team, especially when you start thinking about someone like a Mike Sainristil returning punts and how that affects, say, a Jamison Crowder in the receiver room?
Yeah, I think, go back to last year. I think I made a mistake in sort of overhyping the final decisions they had to make, because it felt like when you're so focused on just the one team, everybody seems more interesting than they are in the broad context of the league. Like, none of their guys got picked up off waivers. That happens most years. There's not nearly as many waiver claims as we act. So yeah, I think there's a lot of positions where they're beyond. There's more players that we can imagine being on the 53 than there are spots available. I think the secondary has a ton of guys. I did a 53 maybe 3 weeks ago or so, and I had them keeping 12 defensive backs, which is more than I would normally. But I when in doubt, I went for sort of the upside guys, the long-term plays, and I just felt in the secondary there were a bunch of those. But tight end, I don't know. Are they going to keep 4? If they do, I think there's arguably 6. There's arguably 6 guys for 4 spots. That's assuming they keep 4. But just to go back to your point about Sainristil, so you look at receiver, right? Jamison Crowder as the punt returner would effectively be the 6th receiver. I don't know what kind of a role he'd have as a receiver, but let's just say that happened. Is that the best way for them to go? Like, Jamison Crowder is I like the guy as a person. He's steady, and he had that really one big return last year. But otherwise, his numbers were similar to Dax Milne from the year before, and nobody wanted Dax Milne back. So does it really make sense to keep Crowder? Well, it does if you don't have anybody else. But if Sainristil, just as an example, could do that, well, now all of a sudden you have a guy who's got a lot of spark with the ball in his hand. But now you maybe only have to keep 5 receivers now, and all of a sudden you can keep an extra lineman or who's somebody, a third quarterback, what have you. So yeah, I do think that punt returner situation, special teams in general, is always such a tiebreaker. But I think in general that punt returner scenario is going to, and the kick returner less so, but more the punt returner, I think really is going to be a big factor in the 53. Maybe it is just Crowder ultimately, but if they want to maximize the roster, then I think having somebody else back there besides Crowder is a very interesting way to go.
You say Crowder would be the 6th receiver. I'm curious who your first 5 are. Terry, Jahan, McCaffrey feel like the 3 obvious ones. Who else do you have as the other 2 before Crowder?
Yeah, I mean, look, De'Ami Brown has obviously not had a lot go right for him in his first 3 years, but there's still talent, there's still skill. Maybe this new coaching staff gets more out of him, and it's not like there's a ton of options elsewhere. Zacchaeus, who's been around the league a little bit, he's had some pretty productive seasons, 30, 40 catch kind of seasons. He's only a 5'8" guy, but in my head, I'm kind of thinking, all right, he's probably the guy, and then Crowder would be 6th. Look, if I've kind of like Bryson Tremaine, the undrafted free agent from last year out of Stanford, who would give them real size. Maybe he could sneak on. If I keep saying Crowder as the punt returner, maybe Kazmir Allen gets that role, and he's the 6th receiver / returner. But yeah, the receiver room is not particularly. So this goes to the point before where you said, like, how many guys are there that could make the team. I could point to any of these guys and maybe even 1 or 2 others. I mean, I didn't even mention Mitchell Tinsley, who made the roster last year, right? But, he didn't really play much at receiver. All these guys could make it, but at the same time, I kind of feel like after the first 3, it's sort of like a shrug, like, all right, well, let's see what happens in training camp, because right now I don't feel particularly strong about any of them. And that's with McCaffrey, a rookie, and Jahan Dotson coming off a poor season. So let's see where they're at. But yeah, there should be some interesting competition there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you mentioned Tremaine because he was an excellent special teams player at Stanford. And like he and Diami both are potentially excellent special teams player. Who plays better at receiver? Who do they like more on teams? Like these are the position battles beneath the position battles, if you will, that I think make training camp really fun and are going to be interesting to follow the next couple of weeks. Real quick, Ben, I'd like to just touch base with you off the field, if you will. The Jason Wright move, certainly predictable. It happens last week. Where do you think the organization looks for the next team president, and what kind of timeline do you think that they're on for that?
Yeah, in the past, because Bruce Allen had the team president role, and he was obviously very involved in football, we kind of look at it like sometimes maybe like president of football operations. I don't think that's where this is going. I would guess it's just more of a business hire, right? I mean, Adam Peters is I don't see them putting anybody over Adam Peters. So I think this person is a business person. And then in that regard, who knows? I mean, I would imagine Josh Harris obviously has deep ties with the business world. So does Mitch Rales. So I imagine they must have tons of people that they would consider for this thing. And obviously Harris also owns other teams. There could be somebody from there. We've already seen he's used staff from the Sixers and Devils to help the overall situation here. So that's how I would guess. I don't know who that would be necessarily, but I would say that to me it's more of a business hire than a football hire.
No, I think that's 1,000% what's going to happen. And considering the politics literally at play for RFK and all those things, like I really am curious to see where they go. All right, Ben, what can people look for you coverage-wise? How often are you doing the podcast? What are you writing every day? Get the free. This is like get hot ones, except for I didn't make you eat 10 wings first, 3 or 4 of which might have blown your brains out to just roll out the red carpet here and whatever you got for training camp coverage.
I wouldn't last more than 3 wings on that show.
Really? Not a spicy food guy?
No, I remember the first time when chicken wings started becoming a big deal 100 years ago. I went to one place and it was like the options were regular, hot, and like I think literally it was called 3 Mile Island. And my friends were like, "Oh, yeah, let's get the hottest." I'm like, "All right, whatever." And we got it, and oh my Lord, I don't think I could talk for like 10 minutes. So no, that wouldn't be me. But
noted. Okay, no hot wings for Standig. Got it. Okay,
I like that show though.
Yeah, it's great.
But yeah, I've got a story up today after practice with kind of a focus on the defense and the linebackers specifically. Probably be writing every day for the next few days of camp. Podcast, I posted one yesterday. I had Nikki Jabala on with me to kind of go through where we're at, and I'll be doing same probably 2, 3, 4 a week, depending on what happens. Jaden Daniels obviously talks tomorrow, so that I think warrants some coverage. So yeah, we'll get back at it tomorrow.
All right, you can listen to Ben's podcast. Just search the Standig Room Only podcast, and of course read his work in The Athletic. Ben, always appreciate your time, sir. Great to see you, and I won't be out there tomorrow or Sunday, but I'll see you next week.
Awesome, man. Cool. See you then.
That is Ben Standig with us here on The Hoffman Show. Still to come here on The Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Nick Allegretti. Fantastic chat with the Commanders guard coming up next at 5:30. 6 o'clock tonight, we are almost done with our positional group Pick 6 previews. We got quarterbacks tomorrow, but today, wide receivers. It is a doozy to try to get through. There is a ton to talk about at this position, as Ben and I just kind of gave you an accidental preview of, but so much to talk about, so much to consider. We will get to that coming up at 6 p.m. Logan and I recorded Take Command today as well after practice, so let's get a little Paulson sprinkled into the program at 6:30. His thoughts on some of the initial days of practice here in training camp. So all that still to come. Allegretti next here on the Team 980. It is the Hoffman Show. We're here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And this is a show that likes to take field trips, especially to Commanders training camp. And today, we got out there, watched practice, and then had a chance afterwards to talk to Nick Allegretti, who is hoping to start at left guard for Washington this year. Of course, a three-time Super Bowl champion with the Kansas City Chiefs. And here was our conversation with Nick Allegretti after day 2 of training camp. How was your summer, man? And I'm sure you're excited to be back playing a little ball, but how was the offseason for you?
Man, it was great. I was really excited to get out here to OTAs, get my feet set here, and then, found a place to live, and then was able to go back.
All right. Here we go. In 3, 2, and 1. With Nick Allegretti after day 2 of training camp. How was your summer, man? And I'm sure you're excited to be back playing a little ball, but how was the offseason for you?
Man, it was great. I was really excited to get out here to OTAs, get my feet set here, and then, found a place to live, and then was able to go back to Chicago and enjoyed the time with the family. I got 2 daughters, and it was awesome, and now they'll be down in a week, so it'll feel real. The whole family will be here. It'll be good.
Nice. For you, have you got any time to kind of explore the area, do anything? Because I know guys are pretty in and out, come in for practice, leave. Is that something you want to do, or are you just I'm here to play football? How are you treating kind of this new home for the first time for you as a pro?
It was a lot of house hunting over the summer. So explored the area, not in the best way, but I definitely got around. Went over to D.C. for a day, met a buddy that works in town, and went to a few of the monuments. I'm a big history guy, so I do enjoy that area. And then the goal is to get out to a few of the battlefields.
Nice. I know didn't know your history guy. I know you're a big coin guy.
Yeah, so they're 1-1. You know?
Yeah. How did the coin collection, the coin habit start, if you will?
So I, as a kid, I always loved wheat pennies because they're 1958 and before. They're Lincoln head, but the wheat back, and you could find them in change. So I was like, man, it's so cool. You can find a different penny in change. It's worth about 2 or 3 cents. I'm making money every time I find it, And I thought it was cool. And then one of my buddies. His grandfather unfortunately passed away, and he had a big collection. So we went through it. We brought it to a coin store, and I think the owner of the coin store knew how interested I was. And he could tell, so he took probably 3 or 4 hours going through every coin, telling me what it was, and gave me a magazine when I left, and I was hooked. That was about 13, 14 years ago probably, and just been a great hobby to remove myself from the football life when I need to and enjoy that.
What would you say is like the gem of your collection?
That'd be an 1893 S Morgan silver dollar, lowest vintage of the normal Morgan State or Morgan set. Morgans are you guys have probably seen them, but you wouldn't know what it is. It's a silver dollar. It's got a beautiful front, beautiful back. It's one of the most well-designed coins that we probably ever did, and then. So that's my main set, and that's my favorite coin.
Do you have do you know if you can take tours of the U.S. Mint? Because that's here, right?
Yes, you can. And then there's also at the Smithsonian they have, and I've been before, but they have some incredible coins. We're hoping to later in the year, maybe towards November, do some type of charity event around bringing some kids out to the Smithsonian and getting to look at some history pieces, maybe some vets because it's in November. So we're hoping to get something like that going and I love coins and I love teaching people about them, and even if they're not going to dive into the hobby, it's cool for me to talk to other people about them and see that they have a little bit of interest. It's worth it.
No, that's very cool. I can see the passion you have for it.
Yeah.
I love that. Nick Allegretti with us here on the Hoffman Show. So your other passion, I was told, is sports radio. You like listening to goofballs like me, specifically Danny Parkins up at 670 The Score in Chicago. How did you get into sports radio? And at some point as a professional athlete, did you kind of go, why do I still listen to this?
So wrestling was how I got into it. Every weekend as a kid, you wake up at 4:30, you got to drive to a wrestling tournament for weigh-ins, and I'd be groggy as heck, me, my mom, my brother, and then my dad's driving. And my dad's driving, he controls the radio, and it was The Score, it was Mad Dog Radio, it was just sports radio the entire time there, the entire time back. Every time I was in the car with my pop, sports radio. Sports is how, me and my brother, my dad, and my mom, that's how we bonded. We love sports. And just listening we're big Chicago sports fans. We're diehards. Obviously had to give the Bears fandom up for the time being, but just love listening to people talk about sports, listen to opinions. Me and my brother being like, that's a terrible opinion, and we argue it. It's fun. Sports are, fortunately they are my profession, but it's been my whole life, and just love listening to it, talking about it.
Cubs or Sox?
Sox all day. Only me and my brother, only two in the family. Everyone else is. Oh. The entire extended family and the two families my brother and I married into, all Cubs fans. Me and my brother held strong, though.
Interesting. And, got to have it. Especially as an O lineman. I feel like
Absolutely.
That's one of the great traits. So obviously coming here from Kansas City, what are the things that you want to take from obviously what was a tremendous, dynastic run in Kansas City, but some of the core tenets that you think help that besides Patrick Mahomes is an alien who's very good at playing football, that you want to bring here to Washington and help implement as DQ and everybody kind of implements the new culture here?
I think the biggest thing that I took is just the competitive nature that those guys had over there. It was every single day, the best players on the team were competing the hardest. And that's how it has to be. It has to be, the guys that are trying to make the team, they're competing their butt off, but they're looking over there and they're a 22, 23-year-old rookie being outworked by a multiple-time MVP, and it's like, I gotta work harder. And setting that standard of having the older guys, the more experienced guys being the hardest working guys on the team, it drives those young guys, and the young guys continue to drive the old guys, and it's a really good cycle. I would say the competitive nature that they took to just every day, practice, walkthrough, basketball in the locker room, whatever we were playing, they competed, they had fun, and it really makes what is a very hard sport a lot of fun.
For you going this year, you were a role player there. Obviously, you were able to step up in the Super Bowl, which is a neat trick. But going to that full-time starter, like what changes for you day to day, and then what stays the same day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I'm here to compete for that left guard spot. I want that spot. I'm not going to be comfortable and say that I have that spot yet. I got to go win that spot, and that's my goal of this training camp. I'd say the one difference is preparing daily more for one position. For 5 years, I was preparing for right, left, and center every single day, and did a lot of moving inter practice. So it is a little nice to get to play one position per day, and hopefully one position for the whole season. That's the biggest thing, and then the other added aspect is when you move throughout the O-line, your body stays a little balanced. Playing one position, some things will start to, your left side or your right side will get a little bit more sore. So staying on top of recovery and, managing that is going to be a new challenge for me that I'm excited about. And I'm just excited for this year.
Is that something you work on with Bobby? Is it something you work on with Chad? That balance element is something you just know you do yourself in the weight room? How's that process go?
It's just something I've had an old high school teammate who's got a practice back home, does a great job. He just helped me with moving my joints, and that's something I do every day, making sure my joints are moving the right way so that the muscles and everything that we train can do their job. And then there's a pretty easy evaluation system, and you go through it every morning and you feel, left hip's tight or right knee's a little sore, and then you've got a further game plan from that. So I've developed a pretty good system, and I think I've got a good game plan for the year.
Nick Allegretti with us, another minute or two here on the Hoffman Show. I'm so curious to hear your first impressions of Bobby Johnson. He was a name that I think a lot of fans were like, wait, the guy from New York? Because they've had such mixed results the last couple of years. Obviously did a great job developing a guy like Andrew Thomas. There's been some success there. Also, last year was really rough for them. They had a ton of injuries. What's been your first impression of Bobby and the things that you think DQ and Cliff saw in him that made them want to bring him here and coach you guys up?
God, I know he's fired up. He is a ball of energy every single day. Which is not always the case for offensive line coaches. Sometimes, offensive line could be a little bit more of a drier position, but he is fired up every single day. You can tell that he cares about what he's doing. He cares about helping each of the 15 offensive linemen we have here get better. And every time that one offensive lineman gets better, the whole group gets better because we continue to push each other. Pardon my French, but last year. Last year's last year. We've all moved on. I've moved on. I'll take what I learned from those guys. Bobby's learned a ton through the many places he's been. Had a lot of success throughout his career. He's head offensive line coach in this league for a reason, and really enjoyed the few months we've had with him so far.
Last but not least, I have to ask, what's the freakiest thing you ever saw Mahomes do in a practice?
What? I don't
feel
know.
Like he's got 6 clips from training camp already this year.
I know listen, he is incredible, and that's one thing. I leave that behind me, but love the guy. Absolutely helped me in my career, and has helped change my life. The craziest thing for me is that he'll do screwing around at practice in a competitive nature, so not messing around, but he'll just see something and go out behind the back and under the leg, a no look, and then he'll be like, that kind of felt all right. And then we'll go to the game week and we'll practice it that way. And, that's kind of how back in the day when I was able to catch a pass, he would throw it to me at practice because it was fun. He'd throw it behind the back, whatever, because it's fun to watch the big guy catch a ball. And then we get to the game and I was actually open. So he's like, screw it, threw me the ball. So it's the messing around, having fun, and then being like, I think I could do that in the game. It'll really screw with some guys. So it's incredible.
That's what makes sports fun, though, right? The creativity, the problem solving, that is what sports is at its core.
Absolutely. I think that's one thing that he's brought back to football is the rigid nature of quarterback that was developing probably through the early 2000s. He blew it up.
Yeah.
Showed up and, footwork is what it is, and, you got different arm angles, and he's running his little circles, and, he brought creativity back to the sport, and look what it's changed so many quarterbacks. It's brought new quarterbacks into the league. Jaden, the way he's able to play, I know that him and Pat have been in contact for the past couple of years. I think he randomly reached out and probably been a huge help. And, it's really cool what he's done to the sport. This sport is been my life. It's incredible, and over the past 5 years, he's definitely changed it.
Yeah, no doubt. This would be a good sports radio topic, too, the creativity of the quarterback position. There, he's programming for us now. Nick Allegretti, appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely appreciate you guys.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So earlier today, we just talked about this in trending. The Nationals got no hit. Dylan Cease of the Padres gets the no-hitter on Washington. And I'm guessing they're talking about this over on The Fan, or talked about this earlier, because Grant asked me as I walked out in the hallway in between segments, hey, if you are sitting front row, which Grant had the hookup and they were actually sitting front row for this. If you're sitting front row today and you're a Nationals fan and you're watching Dylan Cease no-hit the Nats, are you rooting for the no-hitter or are you rooting for the Nationals? I will not tell you what I said, Anthony. I'm going to ask you that question. If you were sitting front row like GP and the boys were today, would you have been rooting for the no-hitter or the Nationals?
Probably for the no-hit, just because we're already losing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Why not, be a part of some history? Granted, you are on the wrong side of history, but who cares?
But you're not. You're not a player. No, like
you
I got no hits.
You asked me as a fan, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
As a
That's
fan,
the thing.
yeah.
The Wii. What's this Wii stuff? I'm just watching.
Oh, I guess I just group myself in with.
No, but that's what I'm saying is, like, as a fan, it's not like someone's gonna be like, hey, one day. This is actually proving the point, right? One day when you got grandkids, like, hey, did you ever get to see any history? Yeah, I saw the Nationals get no hit by Dylan Cease. It's different than, hey, Granddad, were you ever a part of history? Oh, yeah, I was on that Nationals team that got no hit I was in the lineup that day, got no hit by Dylan Cease.
Yeah.
It's cool 50 years later when you're a fan. It's not as cool when you were a player.
Yeah.
So that's when not actually being a part of the Wii, I think, gives you the license to say, I would rather see history.
Yeah, for sure. Like, even when LeBron was going off, like, I didn't get to see him. I mean, I wasn't there for those games, but if I was there, I definitely would have been rooting for, the history.
For
as
sure.
Opposed to,
And it also depends, right? If the Nationals were in a tight division race, I'd be like, no.
That would be different, though.
No. Like, let's get this win, because we don't want to lose the NL East by one game and then be like, I was rooting for guess I kind of asked for this, huh? No. This is a lost season. I embrace it's not a totally lost season, to be clear. Like, the Nationals aren't where the Wizards were last year, but in a season that's probably not going to the playoffs, like, let's help the draft pick out a little bit. If you lose an extra game, you get to witness some history as a fan in the front row. Yeah, I think you root for history there. I actually don't think it's that hard. I know some people will disagree. I had a thought 45 seconds ago that people might start calling in, and I just looked at the phone, and there was a call there. Now it's gone. I don't know what happened to the dude calling in. But, like, I was like, I feel like people are going to call up and be very angry about this, and that's fine. I respect your opinion as a sports purist. I'm not saying that I'm not saying there's a right answer here, but that's kind of the point. I don't think there's a right answer here. My answer, my personal preference, would be to witness history. I understand if you feel the opposite. I've witnessed some history before. That's what sports are about, is the memories. Sometimes you're on the wrong end of a memory, but you can at least appreciate the history. At least that's what I say. What say you, Chris in Damascus?
Hey there, Mr. Hoffman. You got me?
Yeah, I got you, loud and clear.
Okay, so ninth inning, 3-0 game, only down 3 runs. We're a fighting, scrapping team. Jacob Young, second batter up. You're the unwritten rule, you don't bunt in a no-hitter situation. Was the third baseman in or back? Because if the third baseman is back, Jacob Young is a great punter for a hit. We're only down 3 runs. We're still rallying. I haven't heard anybody mention that. I'm not quitting. Now I know this isn't, but hypothetically, Patrick Corbin's going to get a loss, man. We fight to the last out. And I'm not saying anything about the no-hitter, seeing it. This is just...
Yeah, but that's the difference, Chris, is like, I'm Anthony and I are not players. The players should be the players shouldn't be like, oh, it'd be really cool if we got no hit today.
But I wanted to know, I missed that part. I didn't know if the third baseman was in or back.
I don't know. Truthfully, Chris wasn't watching. I was watching the U.S. Women's National Team game and watching us beat up on Zambia.
I wonder what the unwritten rule people, because Bruce Bochy's a class act manager, but I just wonder.
Yeah,
he was back, and Jacob Young laid one down.
Yeah, I don't know what the unwritten rule people would say, and I would honestly, Chris, I would say like, if it's a known bunter and he's trying to get on, it's a 3-run game. That's totally fair. And that's the thing. I think sometimes in sports we get a little caught up in the unwritten rules and like forget to win the game. But my question is purely about the history. My question is, which one would you rather see? I think that's another fun hypothetical question. I do think that's fun. And it kind of goes to like, we had this conversation 2 weeks ago with Angel Reese in the double-double streak. Like, and the comments on those, posts on YouTube where we cut up the shorts and everything, and they've got literally 150,000 views. It's the most viewed thing we've ever done. And it's, you can play to the final whistle. Okay, well, what about this other situation? What about this? What about that? And it's like, they're all a little bit different. I think that there's rules to wiggle there when it comes to history and records and stuff. When I think career records and season-long records, I think those are fair game to hunt down. Like with last year, Terry getting across 1,000 yards. No problem with making sure that he gets across that number. Late in the game, game's out of hand, whatever. Make sure that he gets the catch that he needs to get across 1,000. Especially like bluntly, if there's money on the line for guys, no problem with that. Career records, we've seen this before. I can't remember. There was a women's basketball player in college who was like 2 points away from the all-time scoring record at her school, I think it was, and tore her ACL in like the game before. And so what do? The next game, like they put her out there for the opening tip. She gets to walk underneath the basket. They win the tip. They throw the ball down. They get the layup. She gets to break the record that she would have broken if not for the injury. And the other team then gets a free layup, take a foul, sub her out. Game basically starts again 2-2 with 20 seconds elapsed. But she gets a record that she would have gotten because of injury. I have no problem with that. Like, she's earned the right to be there, has terrible luck. I think the person who had the record probably was cool with it too. Be like, you know what? The only reason she wouldn't have broken my record is because of injury. She deserves that place in history. Go ahead. But it's different than, hey, we're down 7 and we're trying to force feed a post player with 7 seconds left in the game to keep a double-double streak alive. A streak like that is one you accumulate during a season, by your play. And so that's why I was like, I don't like that one as much. But the history thing's always fun. Anthony, quickly on the way out here, before we get to our wide receiver preview at 6 o'clock, what's the most historic sports performance you've seen in person? Is there one that pops to mind?
I would probably have to go to high school, to be honest.
What
and I couldn't even say that was high. I wouldn't even know if that was a record for those guys.
What is the game that is like so fresh in your mind that you're referencing some vague high school game?
I was down at Peach Jam, and I want to say Cade Cunningham won for 40.
I would say it's probably not historical, but like I see why it sticks in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, historical. I would have to really do some deep diving and like.
I would have to think about it harder.
Yeah.
I was on a heater where I would call Wizards games and Wizards opponents would put up 50, so that was fun. I called the first half of like Lakers Wizards and AD had 50. Then I called the first half with Dave and Glenn of Wizards Bucks and Giannis had 50.
Oh, wow.
So I was a real curse of Anthony Haney, if you will, for a hot second there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can't wait for August 23rd.
Next Spirit game, chance for you to break the curse? Or is it a Mystics game?
Yep, Mystics. August 23rd. Can't wait.
Okay.
Need to get it out of my system before the NFL season starts.
Yeah. Otherwise, Zaire's going to ban you.
He actually, we had a conversation about that. And he was like, now I think about it, Anthony, you guys might be on to something. I said, yeah, I'm trying to get out of my system before your season starts.
All right.
So.
We'll see what we can do. All right. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, the wide receiver position is deep for the Commanders, and there are a lot of amalgamations of how this roster could come together. We will dive into the who's and what kind of roles these guys could carve out next on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And every single day at 6 o'clock, starting last Tuesday and going through tomorrow, we are taking a look at the Commanders position by position, asking 6 key questions about the team that you all love, a team that has a lot of questions, more than 6, but we figure 6 at a time per position group is a good way to break it down. So with that, it is time for one of the most interesting groups, and that is wide receivers, in the form of today's Pick 6.
The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level, and build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
Wide receiver has been one of the most interesting positions in the near decade that I've covered the Washington Commanders. There have been years where there have been 7 guys to make the team. Sometimes it's 5. Sometimes it feels like it could be 8 or 9. Sometimes it's like, damn, are we going to get to 5? This is a year that is much closer to there could easily be 7. Although I think with the depth other places on the roster, that it's going to be hard to keep that many. That makes getting to know each guy individually really important. So let's start with
number 1,
which is who are the dudes. Just go in alphabetical order here, or I guess whatever order they are on the website, on the Commanders roster site, because Olamide Zaccheaus, it starts with an O and then his last name is Z. That's definitely not alphabetical order on either front. So however they're sorting this is how we're going to roll with it. Olamide Zaccheaus, 6th year out of Virginia, 5'8", 193, has had some really, really solid years in Atlanta and a couple of other spots. And he was brought in as a veteran. I think this is a guy who's all but a lock, depending on if he were to just get thoroughly beat out to make the team. With that said, De'Ami Brown has been occupying that wide receiver 3 role. You know Luke McCaffrey's going to be in the mix there. So I do think Zaccheaus is under some pressure to make plays, but they brought him in for a reason. He's got some vertical speed. He's got some downfield threat. He is probably the 3rd best wide receiver on this team right now, behind Dotson and McLaurin, but he's got to prove that to be true, and that's got to be so big of a gap that him not being as active as some other guys might be on special teams is enough to keep him on the roster. But if I had to pick a lock, a 4th lock behind the rookie McCaffrey and the 2, studs in Dotson and McLaurin, studs being a relative term, we'll talk about it, Zaccheaus would probably be the guy. Bryson Tremaine, 2nd year out of Stanford, rookie last year, going into his 2nd year on the practice squad last year. And he made a fair amount of plays in training camp, in some preseason games. This year, he's making plays in training camp. He's got some good rapport with quarterbacks. He's a big target, which is unique. He's the biggest receiver on the roster at 6'4". And he was also a dog on special teams in college. And he's a guy that I think could wind up making the squad as a 5th or 6th guy. I just think that his, a quarterback-friendly body frame, the fact that he seems to know how to get open, the physicality he can bring to the position, the height, which is beneficial in the red zone, and the special teams ability. He was the backup punt protector today as they rotated through. Reeves, obviously the first guy. He was the 2nd guy up in that all-important special teams role. I wonder if Bryson Tremaine finds his way onto this roster. If not, he is certainly a guy to keep in mind on the practice squad and someone that I think they would love to keep developing at the receiver position to see if he can get on this team next year. Mitchell Tinsley made the team last year, 6'1", 205, out of Penn State. He's a good receiver. I don't think, Tinsley drops down for me because he's not a teams guy, special teams meaning. I don't know what kind of chance he has unless he just outright wins it at receiver, and I think there's too many other good receivers to make it. Another guy, similar build, in fact, listed at the same exact 6'1", 205, but 2 years younger, brought in by this group. Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint out of Georgia. He started to make a couple of plays, had a nice spring, hurt his hamstring. Now back in the mix. We'll see how he continues to perform. Dax Milne, just professional route runner, but not very dynamic. 6'1", 200 pounds. is a safe option at punt returner. I think there's too many other options here. Again, a really safe guy who can play multiple positions, a great guy to have on your practice squad, because if you need a receiver, he can come in and play X, he can play Z, he can play, in the slot. So a great guy to have in your building, but not necessarily someone that you want to be one of your top 4 receivers getting snaps. Terry McLaurin, you know who he is. Luke McCaffrey, rookie, 6'2", 200 pounds, out of Rice, converted quarterback. He's going to make the team, plays really hard. He's starting to make some plays. Love that. Jahan Dotson, really, really interesting spot for Jahan this year. Coming off a down year, super productive a couple years ago, in a big-time prove-it year in terms of where he is in his contract life. Can he earn an extension? Or are they going to let him play out the 4th year just as is? Do they pick up his 5th-year option? There's a lot of questions in the oncoming offseason for Jahan Dotson and how he plays this year and how he blocks and how he plays with the toughness and physicality that's required to be on an Adam Peters designed roster and a Dan Quinn coach team are enormous questions. I also do wonder, he's a guy who's got a punt return history at Penn State. Can that be a part of his game? And will they try to get the ball in his hands where he doesn't necessarily have to fight through contact at the line of scrimmage? Also, how does Cliff Kingsbury use him? I think that's a huge factor for Jahan. We'll talk about him more in just a few minutes in even more depth. Davion Davis, he's number 84. You'll definitely see him make some plays in camp. Again, I just think it's tough sledding for him. 27-year-old out of Sam Houston State. Jamison Crowder, veteran, who I covered when he got drafted back in 2015. Obviously, it's pretty simple. He is your best punt returning option, potentially. And if that's the case, if it turns out to not be potentially, but they think for real, he's going to make the team. And if not, and they think that there's other options that are equally as good, and whether it's Mike Sanders still, whether it's some other guys we're talking about at the receiver position, including potentially Dotson, whether it's Emmanuel Forbes, like Jamison is an interesting one because he is an older player. I know they like his leadership. I know they like his veteran savvy. He's great to have in the building. He's great to have in the room. He just professionally gets open. Not super explosive at this stage of his career. He's always been quicker than he is fast, but that is really valuable in, hey, we need 5 yards. Let's trust Crowder on a choice route and he'll get open. That's who he's been his entire career. Just do they have someone else who's younger and more dynamic and has more big play upside, like a Kaz Allen, to take his spot? I think Crowder's in an interesting place because he's so unique. He's a unique body type, shorter guy, 5'9", 177. They brought in Damiere Byrd, who's actually similar, but Crowder's got like more stock to him, even though they're similar sized. Damiere Byrd's a little bit, slighter of a player, more of a deep threat down the field than the quick burst type. And so Crowder's really interesting. Byrd, as I said, 8th year out of South Carolina, same age as Crowder at 31 years old. They brought him in for a reason, but that reason might just be, hey, let's get a little bit more veteran presence in here. I think Byrd's got an uphill battle to make this roster. De'Ami Brown, 4th year, North Carolina. We expected him to maybe bust out last year with his college quarterback in Sam Howell, and it just hasn't happened. He just never has taken to the NFL game as a receiver. With that said, I think he's underrated because people think he's a total bust. He's not. He's a highly effective blocker, and he's a demon on special teams. And if he can be that, he's going to have a spot on this team. And I hope that Bobby Ingram can unlock him and Cliff Kingsbury can unlock him as a receiver in the pass game. But I will say, De'Ami is a hard worker, and he has been wide receiver 3 as they've gotten, out there, and it's Terry and it's Jahan, and De'Ami's been at the top of the depth chart. They rotate a lot, but I think it's worth mentioning that he's starting from a good position. So I'm very curious to see how the rest of his spring goes. The rest of his fall goes. He's gonna have to make some plays here in camp to make the team. It's not a lock, but it is worth mentioning that Brown starts in a maybe a better spot than we thought he would coming out of camp or coming into the season, coming out of the spring. Kaz Allen, undrafted last year, UCLA. Punt return specialist, crazy quickness. I think he's got a chance to make some plays if he takes well to coaching and can, show some things in the screen game, show some things on some of these quick underneath routes. And then does he take a punt for 40 yards in a preseason game? He's going to get opportunities. Punt returning is where he can make this team. All right, that's the dudes. It's Allen, Brown, Byrd, Crowder, Davion Davis, Jahan Dotson, McCaffrey, McLaurin, Milne, Jack Saint, Tinsley, Tremaine, and Zacchaeus. And I could make a case for basically all of them making the team based off of how they've performed so far. That tells you something about the offense, which is really nice. But it also does say, like, they're going to have some tough decisions to make. Obviously, it's there's a hierarchy, there's a ranking there. They're not saying they all have even chances, but a very, very interesting and good group that's very, very deep. And they're led by
Number 2,
Bobby Ingram, the former veteran wide receiver, longtime NFL player who was here last year. And I think that's interesting. And one of the things, I've mentioned this a couple times in the last 2 days, one of the things that I think I really want to pursue as I continue to go out there to training camp is talking to Jahan, Terry, Diami, the receivers, and say, what's different about Bobby this year? Because last year, Bobby Ingram was working for Eric Bieniemy, working for Ron Rivera. And as a position coach, yeah, you have a lot of freedom to be able to do some stuff within your room, but ultimately you're within an offense and a structure that your guys are going to be performing in. And it's hard sometimes to judge coaches based off that, because did Jahan Dotson get worse last year because Drew Terrell left and he's a really good wide receivers coach and Bobby Ingram is underwhelming? Or was it because Eric Bieniemy didn't put Jahan Dotson in good positions last year as a coordinator, and that's why Jahan's performance struggled? So was it a position coach level thing? Was it a coordinator level thing? I'm guessing it was a coordinator level thing. I don't think that Dan Quinn would have kept Bobby Ingram and Cliff Kingsbury would have kept Bobby Ingram if they didn't believe in who he is as a coach, if they didn't think that he brought the right kind of energy. I enjoy watching Bobby coach. I think he's really detail-oriented. I think he's got a great demeanor and very calm in how he goes about things. And I think it's great for the personalities that they have in that room. So Bobby Ingram, receivers coach. Of course, Cliff is the offensive coordinator. Brian Johnson is the pass game coordinator. Those are kind of the important guys to know on the wide receiver room.
Number 3,
who is the best player in the room? This is easy. It's 17. I think this year, as we talked about in our top 10 most important Commanders countdown, this year is an exciting year for Terry, because hopefully we're going to figure out just how good this guy is. He's been productive. He has been over 1,000 yards almost every single year. He is a guy that's gotten a decent number of targets, but sometimes it feels like he gets force-fed bad targets where you're just like, yeah, you're throwing the ball to throw it to him, not because you're designing good looks for him. And I think Cliff is capable of designing good looks for Terry, both to get him free vertically, something that he has wanted to do a lot more of and was very, very frustrated at the lack of a vertical passing game last year under Bieniemy. And I think getting him the ball in space is essential. Terry has a ton of plays on tape at Ohio State where he catches the ball with a little bit of space and takes it a long, long way. He is a bore to bring down. And so if you can find ways to get him the ball on slants, get him the ball on in-breaking routes where he has a chance to run after the catch and Jaden Daniels can be accurate with it and hit him in stride, I think you could be looking at an 1,200 yard season for Terry. If he and Jaden can't get on the same page, if maybe he's not as good as we think and he was just getting targets and looks and catches because he was the best of bad receiving rooms, then okay, well then we're going to revisit things after the year and go, damn, we all love Terry and who he is as a person and his story and all this kind of stuff, but do they need to move on? Do they need to explore an Ayuk trade in the offseason or signing someone like that? Do they need to do all these other things? What does this receiver room mean? And I think that is a huge question that certainly is percolating in Adam Peters' mind, because if it goes the right way, Terry's everything you want as a teammate, everything you want as a leader, as someone in the community. You give that guy an extension because he deserves it. And so it comes down very simply. We know who Terry is as a person. We know who he is as a leader. We know he's going to be bought in. What is his production? And I think it's a monster year for Terry personally on that level. And we'll see if he does produce how much it can lift the team, because I do think it could be quite a bit.
Number 4,
who's the wild card player amongst the group? I think the answer is Dotson. I think he was so good in the red zone specifically and his ability to score and make plays down there. His rookie year, even though he missed some time, 7 touchdowns. And then last year was just a disaster. And he looked so good in camp. And that's the thing that I think is so frustrating is in the spring and in training camp, we're talking like, is this dude going to have a 1,000-yard season? Is he going to have an 1,100-yard season? Is he going to have a 100-catch year? Like, we thought Jahan had the chance, not because we were just bought into him as a talent, because production-wise in training camp. And it's honestly a good reminder to take some of what we see in training camp, not with a grain of salt, but with an eye of caution. But what if Jahan is like a 1,000-yard caliber guy? That changes the dynamic of this offense. And by the way, it changes the dynamic of the future. Because if he and Terry are the wide receivers for the next, let's say, 3 years, that is a huge relief. And McCaffrey as well. That's a huge relief to have the continuity with a young quarterback. And if Jahan's not up to it, well, now you're in the receiver market in a major way. And you got to figure out, what do we do with Jahan? What do we do with Terry? The money becomes harder. Everything becomes more difficult. So huge upside potential. What is he positionally? Is he a guy that you want playing on the outside? Is he a guy that you move into the slot? Can he learn how to play with a little bit more urgency? Can he play off physicality? Or are you always going to have him in stacks and bunches and in motion to try to keep him, to get DB's hands off of him from a free release standpoint? There's just a lot of stuff to figure out. And that's part of what this season is about. This is a season of discovery in many ways for Adam Peters and for Dan Quinn and his staff to understand. They made a lot of changes, almost 30 new guys, probably by the time the 53 rolls around. But they have to understand the guys that they kept. And there's only so much you can do that on tape. And so Jahan, to me, is the biggest wild card.
Number 5.
All right, number 5 is always a question that I don't know. Anthony Haney, speaking of wild cards, that's your responsibility, sir. What is your burning wide receiver question?
Before I ask my question, I have a trivia question for you, Mr. Hoffman.
Ooh la la, hit me with the trivia.
Yes, sir. Do you recall the last time the Washington Commanders had 2 1,000-yard receivers?
Deshaun Pierre, 2016.
Oh, well, that was easy. That was easy. So my question is along those lines. Do you see any combo of receivers?
First of all, that was correct. That was the right answer? Okay.
It was.
Okay.
Do you see any combo of receivers having that kind of production this season? And I will also add, Jamison Crowder also almost had, 900 yards on the season. So it was a season in which they almost had 3 1,000-yard receivers. I'm not saying we're going to have 3.
But could they have 2? They could. I mean, I definitely think that Dotson and McLaurin are capable from a skill set, physical characteristics, trait standpoint of being 1,000-yard receivers. I do not think it will happen. I think there will be a little bit too much distribution of the ball. Like, I could see, let's say, a really good season. Terry's got like 1,200. Jahan's got like 800. Ertz has 600-700 yards. Eckler's got like 400 or 500 out of the backfield. Like, they're going to distribute the ball quite a bit. And I think McCaffrey, 500-600 yards. Like, I think that's all potentially on the table. And I think that Cliff tends to spread things around. Cliff also is a guy that's like, I will feed my dudes. And so, if Jahan can get a couple of big ones and kind of, I don't want to say inflate, but inflate his total, I don't know that he's going to have the volume to get 1,000 unless he's got a couple of just monster games because he has 2 60-yard catches in a game. And now all of a sudden he's got a 150-yard day on 3 catches, something like that. So I think it's going to be tough because I also think they'll run the ball at a decent clip percentage-wise. But talent-wise, yeah. And I think that's what made last year so disappointing is you go into that season thinking, man, do they have one of the best receiving groups in football? Because we projected Jahan. Again, not because we were homer and biased, whatever, because in the spring, he was killing people. He was awesome in the spring and at a really good training camp. And then it didn't translate to the field at all on Sundays once they put the pads on and it was non-Commanders defensive backs. And maybe that part of it had quite a bit to do with it, that he was killing a defensive backfield that turns out was the worst in the league and coached as worst in the league. So long story short, first couple days, I don't think Jahan's done a whole lot. I'd expect that to change as things evolve. And no, I don't think that they will have dueling 1,000-yard receivers this year.
I think the fact that, Jahan does operate, I think, best on timing routes is because, he gets in and out of his cuts. And I think that was
I don't know that he does, though. Like, that's the dirty secret, is he last year did not play with the urgency you need to win in the NFL. Yeah. It's one thing to, like, in a one-on-one drill where there's no pass rush or in a 7-on-7, and you can hit him with the Anthony Haney, let me get out there in my flag football, whatever. No. It's the NFL. You got to win. You got to win right now. And he didn't play with the urgency, and he would get his timing would get knocked off at the line of scrimmage, and he's got to be better than that. Okay. So we'll see if Bobby Ingram and Cliff Kingsbury can get out of him. Because the other thing, too, is, like, They could help him out. They can you motion him. I mean, if freaking Kevin can get Justin Jefferson free releases most snaps, why can't we get Jahan Dotson a free release with less attention on him? So that's the kind of things that I think about at night. Not really. I think about them between 4 and 7 daily on the Team 980 out loud into a microphone for you.
Number 6.
All right, who's going to make the team? 17 makes the team. 1 makes the team. 12 makes the team. That's McCaffrey. That's the easy ones. I'm going to say Zacchaeus. I'm going to say Diami makes it. And that's where I struggle. I think the rest. Let me do this. I think this is more interesting than a true prediction. I think that on some level, Tremaine and Diami are fighting for one position. That like special teams, dog, blocker type. And I think Diami's got the upper hand there. I think that Crowder and Allen and Bird are fighting for one position. Punt returner, slot receiver, smaller target guy. And I think everyone else is just a kind of a victim of the numbers game. And I don't know that the Crowder, Bird, Allen guy actually makes the team. Because there are so many guys at other positions. If you're going to keep 12 defensive backs, you got to cut somewhere. And if you keep 4 tight ends, I think that's one less receiver. I'm going to say they keep 6. I'll say Jameson makes it, but I don't feel great about that. I think tomorrow I'm going to do my first 53, and we'll see how it shakes out.
6 receivers?
That's how most teams keep, 5 or 6.
Okay.
Sometimes they go 7.
Oh, yeah, 7.
This team has gone 7 a couple of times.
Yeah.
They went 7 last year to keep Mitchell Tinsley, then didn't play him the whole year because they were really good at managing a roster.
Yeah.
Yikes. All right. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, Logan's thoughts from the first couple of days of practice take command for you on a Thursday here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And let's get right to it. Logan Paulson and I got to watch practice together today. Then we got to talk into microphones together and hear some of our big takeaways from the first 2 days of Commanders training camp.
It's time. Take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
It is the Takecast. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulson. As we sit here recording 2 training camp practices, in the third one on the way for Friday. Day off, fans in on Saturday, and then Logan Monday. The pads go on. Get out there next week when they start banging around for real. But today we will talk about what we've seen so far, the structure of practice, the build-up, kind of some choices made by the staff on a structural level. We'll get into how Jaden Daniels has looked for the first couple days, and then some of the other key names that we are watching as things go. But Logan, Dan Quinn, Commanders camp number 1, 2 days in, 75-minute practice today, a little over 90 today, so they're clearly ramping up. They've chosen to do some situation work at a heavier dosage than I think a lot of other camps that you were a part of and that I've covered. But what do you make so far of how they've designed this thing and what they're getting out of it?
Yeah, I think, obviously like back when I first started playing in 2010, and then obviously for the majority of my playing career, just when I started to retire, you started to see this type of practice structure early in the off season. Obviously early on or previously, it was like, hey, we're going to go hard. We're going to go 2.5 hours, whatever the time allotment, we're going to make sure we hit that. The problem is like as good a shape as you think you're in, as much as you've prepped in the off season, your body's just not ready to go. So, and like you see a lot of soft tissue injuries early in camp, which, when you have such a limited time frame, and again, training camp is a limited time frame to get ready for the season, even including preseason, any kind of injury is a huge setback, even, like an ankle pull, a calf strain, something like that. So I think what Dan's done here and what the staff's done is really, really smart. So what they're doing, obviously you mentioned the kind of the brevity of practice, right? The 75 minutes, the 90 minutes. That's awesome. As a player, like psychologically, that's so alleviating because you're like, oh, okay, just got to be out here for a little bit, a couple team periods. And the other thing I love is you mentioned the situational stuff, and I got to talk to Dan briefly about this, and he mentioned in his presser how they're doing red zone to start. And the thing I love about that is that it limits the volume, so the amount of high intensity, high speed yards. So if you think about it, if you're working from the 50, working like normal route concepts, you can push that deep post, the fade, the deep cross a little bit more. Here, with the red zone only, you're working from the 20 in. And today we saw that they worked from like the 40 in, right? They just like kind of shorter stuff. And I think that, again, is just a really way to make sure everybody is coming along and is in shape at the same time. I love the position off day also in terms of like making sure guys will go 3 days off, right? And then they'll have the first day of pads. I think that's brilliant, as opposed to trying to squeeze that first day of pads on that Saturday, or what is it, Sunday? What that is.
Yeah, Saturday it would be if they didn't take it off.
Right. I think that's really smart. Like squeeze it in, give them another non-padded day, give them the off day, let them fully recover, and then think about it in terms of like a little like a line graph. It's going up, 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 up. You get a nice down day to recover, back up with the intensity, and then kind of the same thing. So I just think it's smart. I think it's the way that people should be treating their players, and it's not that the intensity is any different. The intensity is very high, obviously very competitive in the competitive periods, but I just think it's smart to let the players acclimate. And I think the tools that he's using to get that done are also really smart.
Yeah, no, I agree. The high-speed running stuff is very, very important, and that's especially conditioning, like sports science-y. You want to make sure you ramp that up in a very smart way. The sprint for your soft tissue stuff comes in, and if you don't give people the room to run 60 yards, well, then it's not a huge problem. And even the special team stuff, like there's a lot of short bursty stuff that's happening, but they're concentrating everything down into the finite skills that you need. I think that was one of the most other interesting things today that we saw, something that I have never seen before in any camp that I have covered. I don't know if you've either seen or participated in anything like this. They basically, at the start of practice, after one individual or after some of the individual sessions, they had a full team football camp. And what I mean by that is literally every player on the roster outside of the specialists and the quarterbacks went through a 3-stage circular or cyclical, stations drill. One station was a scoop and score drill. So ball's on the ground, you got to pick it up, and I guess it's really scoop. The scoring was just more about the scoop. A tackle pursuit drill where it was 3 players, one got a ball, and like you had wide receivers catching footballs and then having the other 2 players pursue. And then you also had Dante Fowler and Cleveland Furl and defensive ends and everybody catching footballs. The second player, a third player would come from behind in pursuit and try to punch the ball out. Or I guess the second player was oncoming, not in pursuit, as a tackler. And then the third station was a kind of route running adjacent catching drill. And every single player that was skill position, whatever, I guess the O-line wasn't in there, but else that could possibly touch the football in these drills. And I think I was talking to you, Dan, and you said, part of this is, just the camaraderie and kind of doing things together. But I also think that, like, when we think Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. defense is so good around the ball, like, the skills required to do that stuff are actually practiced. Concept. You emphasize the things that you think are important, and to see kind of this full team period dedicated to really basic football skills, I think was beneficial, cool, and interesting. And hopefully, I'd say hopefully good in the long term.
Yeah, and I've done stuff like that in college. I did it when I was with Dan in Atlanta. We'd do something similar. The point of the emphasis of that little period changed. This is like ball focused, right? So, ball on the ground, pick it up. Offensive players got to do it. Defensive players got to do it. When ball is life and there's a fumble, and you practice it a little bit more than the other team, it becomes a little bit easier to do, right? One of the drills that I liked a lot was like receivers catching the ball or ball catchers catching the ball, because they had DBs do it like you mentioned. You split 2 bags, and then there's a pursuit guy coming kind of to understand the angle you need to take when the ball is exposed after the guy split 2 defenders, and it forces the receiver or the ball carrier to kind of think about tucking that ball away, even though you've kind of broken through contact. As you break through that contact, ball gets a little bit loose, and that's where the ball punches out. So I really liked that they kind of had some specificity there in terms of like ball catchers, ball handlers, and even for guys making interceptions, it plays very similar. You're looking towards the center, and then the receiver comes in pursuit and punches the ball out. So again, I think it just, you mentioned it, you hit the nail on the head there. Like teams that I've talked to a bunch of different coaches about this, and I say, like, how do you promote turnovers? How do you promote getting the ball out? And oftentimes they say, we talk about it a lot. It needs to be more than talk. It needs to be like a way of life. So here you've dedicated 10 minutes, 12 minutes of practice to ball security, ball awareness. And I think, like, that's not going to be a one-to-one corollary, but it does pay dividends down the road, because you get it just front of mind for everybody. And I think that's extremely important. If the ball is the main thing, treat it like the main thing. Talk about it, be about it, drill it. And I think you see kind of the early stages of that philosophy for Dan Quinn.
Yeah, and if you want to be solid on the fundamentals, practice the fundamentals. Mm-hmm. And they're out there practicing fundamentals along those lines as well. We've never seen officials out here this early. Officials have been at practice every single day. Typically, that's kind of, which is just, you call stuff if it's egregious, but like then you get in games and the officials call it tighter. I understand coaches sometimes want to let guys play. It's pick up basketball rules than it is like we're out there with basketball officials, if you will. But like that's not in the NFL. There's officials in every game. There are no pickup rules. So contact level that's allowed, the amount of holding that's allowed, the grabbing that's allowed. You better be on top of your alignments and all those details. And the officials out there is one less thing that the coaches have to worry about to try to officiate practice as well as coach. It's like a detail-oriented thing. It's great. And then, when it comes to working in red zone, Logan, like this is where you make your money. This is where you win games. It's where you score points. And in that very simplistic way, I don't get why every team doesn't practice red zone more early on in camp. I know like the predominant the game is played on first and second down in the middle of the field. If scoring is how you win games, practice scoring seems like a good idea. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's really important. I think, people say, oh, we struggled in the red zone last year, or people, whatever, struggle in 2 minute. Like, if you struggled at it and you want to get better at it, give it more time. And I think this is a great way to give that area of the field and that specific kind of challenging section of football more time, while also kind of protecting the players and making sure the installs go well. So not only did they get a full team period of red zone, but they get a 7-on-7 of red zone also, which I love to see, because I think it's also good for the quarterbacks too, because the one thing I'd be concerned is the more challenging part for the quarterback. Those, understanding pressure packages, throwing on time, throwing with rhythm. And I think when you look at what Jaden's done in that area, it's been great. So I think, to your point, the more time you spend on something, the better. And obviously they're prioritizing things they want to prioritize, but they're also being smart about making sure that the guys are.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Anything else structurally with the way they ran practice 2 days that you noticed, or anything moving forward that you're looking forward to seeing that you wanted to highlight in particular?
Yeah, I do like also the emphasis on special teams. I think that's been good to see early on. They've had 2.
You loved the one drill today.
I love drill. So, yeah, basically like they did a punt coverage, like punt protection, to a light coverage portion of practice at the beginning, where you get guys catching and you get the blocking service of the punt team working different combinations. So I always think that's fun to see combinations, like who are the starters, the backups, and I think, quite honestly, they've done a pretty and just getting different body and different people playing next to each other, which is great. And then the second drill was more of what I would say like a coverage emphasis, like the big hoops out, those big kind of pass rushing hoops, and you're like, oh, what are they doing? Are they rushing out? Are they practicing kicks? Like, what's going on? And they did a coverage drill. So what you do is you get 2 hoops, 2 players on each hoop, and you have them follow each other in a counterclockwise circle. Then the coach will go, and you, as they play, have to finish the hoop to like basically the mark on the hoop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If he says go at 12, I need to run all the way around to 3, and then I need to run into coverage. And so what is happening with that is basically like one of the things that I always hated about punt coverage early in my career was like, they're like, we want to fan the coverage. So like the guards will be, on the right or left shoulder of the returner, the tackles will be 5 yards outside of that, the wing 5 yards outside of that. The problem with that is that like people get held up at different rates. So even though I'm the guard and I might not be the one who's closest to the football. So what this teaches you how to do is like the first guy out has a landmark on the returner. I think it's like, probably paint it outside shoulder. The second guy is playing off of that guy. So if the returner splits it, you basically would be like the A gap. And if the returner bounces it, then you basically bounce to the B gap and you would tackle. So I think that's just such a good drill, because again, it's so relevant. And there's a problem with punt coverage, right? It's people get on different levels. How do you rep it? Most coaches just say, go out there and run, and we'll out. It's a detailed thought process towards saying, this is the issue with this team. Now, how do we get more reps at getting good at this subtle nuance? So much like picking up the football or being aware of certain ball security situations, I thought this was just a really good drill because of the specificity that it brought to the drill. And it was also good to see the guys that did a really good job with it, like the Christian Holmes, the Percy Butlers, the Tyler Owens, the guys you'd expect that are good special teams guys, Jeremy Reeves, right? The good special teams guys were good at this drill because they understand the fit process. They understand how to be decisive to the football. So also, in addition to being very relevant, it also shows you the guys who are good and have a feel for teams, and in a way that most coverage drills don't.
Yeah, for sure. I will also add on that drill, Sainer still is with the returners,
yes.
And boy, is he quick.
Very quick.
He could definitely find himself, depending on how some other things go with the roster, returning punts this year. Because, God, he's got a skill for it, and if he gets a pick.
Also, a fun note is, everyone talks about him returning kicks, playing defense. Afterwards, he stayed after practice and ran routes with the backup receivers for 15 minutes. Like, he runs slants, he runs choices, he ran a dig. Like, you're like, oh my gosh, in terms of things I would do, I wouldn't think that would be it. But it was cool to see him again, the quickness in the turn. He played receiver in college and still doing that, still working his ball skills. Frankie Luvu stayed after and worked pass rush. It was the whole deal. Stayed and did conditioning. It was awesome. Kind of went and caught balls together, stay and kind of work their craft a little bit. And just how guys chose to spend you off about that. But I thought that was so interesting.
No, that's good. I'll also say this. I feel like some of these guys that we've seen for years here are in just better shape physically. I think John and Duran specifically stand out. Like, one, they look cut up in a way it looked before. Not that they've been like out of shape. They've been, borderline all-pro players, but they're in a different level, have taken it to new heights, and then you see it on the field. Like, you see John Allen downfield pursuing, and you're like, oh man, that was pretty quick. Like, he got down there with some urgency. And so both it's the clarity and the assignment of where you need to be, but also the physical ability to get there. And one note I had today in stuff, the 11 on 11s, like Deron Payne plays, got in the backfield, pass rush, like he's disruptive. And I had a great chat with Nick Allegretti today after practice that folks can check out on my YouTube page and on the Team 980's YouTube page. And he's like, man, blocking out sucks. I hate it every single day. That guy's so good. And so, seeing John get back after the disappointing year last year where he was super duper hammered by that foot and just, probably not able to get in this shape last year because he couldn't work out as hard with the foot stuff. So it's great to see those guys and putting the extra work in the off season and then putting in the extra work after practice every single day. Had a great chat with BSJ earlier that folks can check out as well. Had to wait on doing that chat because he had to make sure that he got his reps in on the jugs machine. And so guys are taking this extra work seriously. It's kind of the standard. Terry talked about it on Wednesday. They've all made this pledge to themselves, to each other. That's just different. That's not from the coaches. It's player driven. And I think doing all the right things about what it means to be a commander is part of that. And, for each guy, it's a little different what they have to do, but these guys seem to be taking it very seriously.
Yeah, I remember when I was in it, had like a player-led portion of practice. And again, this is after Dan had been there for a while. Like, Logan, you're the veteran. Like, what are the guys going to do today for practice? Like our post-practice period. And it was like, oh, we're going to hit the sled, or we're going to hit the bag, or we're going to work pass pro, or we're going to work routes. Whatever
if
we
you
felt
were in charge,
like,
you were definitely hitting something.
We were definitely hitting a lot of stuff. And it was relevant because a lot of the guys were like converted wide receivers, or, one of the guys down there was a rugby player playing football. So like they needed reps with that. But I think that's awesome because you're seeing shades of that happen already is what the reason I bring that up, right? Is you see guys, you mentioned Terry, like we're accountable to each other. You see St. Jude's catching the football, like St. We're still running routes. Another thing Frankie Luvu did is they had Pittman, and I forget the other guy's name, number 47 were out there. They were talking pass rush technique. These are like off-ball linebackers that are working together to kind of get better pass rush stuff. And then all kind of UDFA backer roster receiver guys were down with Sam Hartman in football. And you've seen that structure here for a couple of years, with Ron being out there. And there is something to that. There is something to players taking ownership of something and wanting to improve. And kudos to Dan and the staff for like giving them that time. It'd be so easy to say, hey man, you got to be inside for the lift right now. Like everyone inside for the lift. And it's like, no, you get 20 minutes on the field. Take your time, get what you got to get done, and then we'll go lift. So I think, again, it speaks to kind of the structure, the thoughtfulness, the deliberate nature of practice. I think it shows up even in the post-practice stuff, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that was from Take Command. If you want our insights on the quarterback performance so far, really great chat about Jamin Davis and his potential conversion to edge and how that's going, and some concerns we have, some upside, and then what we see for Emmanuel Forbes so far. Check out the rest of the podcast. I mean, this show's almost over. This show's over in 2 minutes. And so what you can do is you can listen to us for the next 2 minutes. And look, if you want to listen to our friends at BetMGM tonight, we fully endorse that. But you can go to the Take Command podcast. You just search it in your podcast app. It's also in the free. If your favorite podcast app is the Odyssey app, or even if it's not, we're Apple CarPlay enabled. So if you go to the Odyssey app and you're like, hey, play Take Command on the Odyssey app, it should work. And if it doesn't, yell at technology. That always is the best option, Anthony. You just yell at the technology, and then it works, and you feel like you've had an aneurysm.
It does not work
like that. No,
I don't think so. Also, yeah, you just shouldn't be yelling.
No, just don't yell at your technology. It It doesn't help. So traditionally at the end of the show, we do real things. We also do the best thing on the show today. We don't have time for real things. So we just tell people, I think the best thing on the show today was Nick Allegretti. Our chat with the three-time Super Bowl champion, offensive lineman for the Commanders. Anthony, the football stuff was really great with Nick. Listen to that dude talk about coins. I want to start a coin collection. His enthusiasm for coins, top notch.
Yeah.
I want to go on a tour of the U.S. Mint with Nick Allegretti.
Oh, where is it at?
It's in D.C.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Well, hey, look, you learned something new.
I mean,
I really didn't know that.
We're in the nation's capital. We got a lot of stuff here.
We do.
We do.
And we got monuments,
I can't remember.
too.
I can't. Hold on. Now I need to. U.S. Mint address. 801 9th Street.
Oh, that's not far at all.
Not far at all. All right, that's our show. We'll see you tomorrow back here on the Team 980.